Rachel Morgan, a 31-year-old freelance graphic designer, lived with her husband of 7 years, Trevor Morgan, in a ranch-style house on Elmwood Avenue in Riverside, California. To neighbors and acquaintances, the Morgans appeared to be a typical young professional couple navigating the challenges of building careers and maintaining a household in an expensive suburban market. Rachel operated her design business from a converted spare bedroom, serving small businesses and non-profit organizations throughout the Inland Empire region. Her work provided modest but consistent income, averaging approximately $3,200 per month from various clients including restaurants, medical practices, and community organizations that appreciated her creative approach and reliable service delivery. Trevor, 34 years old, worked as a software quality assurance manager for a technology company in Irvine, requiring a daily commute of nearly 2 hours round trip. His position provided the majority of their household income, with an annual salary of $89,000 plus performance bonuses that typically added another $8,000 to $12,000 per year. Their financial arrangement followed traditional patterns, with Trevor managing most major expenses including the mortgage, utilities, and insurance payments, while Rachel contributed to groceries, household supplies, and her own business expenses. This division of financial responsibility would later become significant to investigators attempting to understand the dynamics of their relationship. However, according to evidence that emerged during subsequent investigation, the Morgan marriage had been characterized by a systematic pattern of psychological manipulation and control that had escalated gradually over several years. Mental health professionals would later identify Trevor's behavior as a textbook example of gaslighting, a form of psychological abuse designed to make victims question their own perceptions, memory, and sanity. The manipulation began subtly during the early years of their marriage, when Trevor would contradict Rachel's recollections of conversations or events in ways that seemed minor and potentially accidental. He would claim that Rachel had agreed to social plans she didn't remember making, or insist that she had forgotten important discussions about household decisions. Initially, Rachel attributed these discrepancies to normal memory lapses or miscommunication between spouses. However, the frequency and consistency of such incidents gradually increased, creating a pattern where Rachel began to doubt her own memory and judgment about even routine daily interactions. Trevor's psychological manipulation expanded to include more sophisticated techniques designed to undermine Rachel's confidence and independence. He would move household items to different locations and then express concern when Rachel couldn't find them, suggesting that her forgetfulness was becoming problematic and might indicate underlying health issues. Additionally, Trevor began monitoring Rachel's communications and social interactions under the guise of caring concern. He would question her about phone calls and text messages, often claiming that she had mentioned people or plans that he couldn't remember, further reinforcing his narrative that Rachel's memory was unreliable. The gaslighting intensified when Trevor began sabotaging Rachel's work relationships and professional opportunities. He would provide incorrect information about her availability for client meetings, fail to deliver important messages, and create situations where Rachel appeared unreliable or unprofessional to her business contacts. When Rachel's income began declining due to these disrupted client relationships, Trevor expressed disappointment about her reduced financial contributions, while simultaneously undermining her efforts to rebuild her business. This created a cycle where Rachel felt increasingly dependent on Trevor's income, while doubting her own competence as a professional. Rachel's sister, Michelle Patterson, later told investigators that she had observed significant changes in Rachel's personality and behavior during family gatherings over the previous 3 years. Michelle described Rachel as becoming increasingly anxious, apologetic, and deferential to Trevor's opinions, even on matters where she had previously expressed strong, independent views. Michelle also noted that Rachel had begun checking with Trevor before answering simple questions about her own preferences or experiences, as if seeking permission or confirmation before expressing her thoughts. This behavior was particularly concerning to family members who remembered Rachel as confident and articulate in her communications. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The psychological abuse escalated significantly in early 2024, when Trevor began implementing more aggressive tactics designed to isolate Rachel from potential support systems. He discouraged her from maintaining friendships by creating conflicts or emergencies that prevented her from attending social gatherings, then expressing hurt that Rachel would prioritize friends over their marriage. Trevor also began monitoring Rachel's internet usage and email communications, claiming that he was concerned about her mental health and wanted to ensure she wasn't saying things that might embarrass their family. He installed monitoring software on their shared computer and demanded access to Rachel's social media passwords. When Rachel questioned these invasive measures, Trevor would respond with apparent concern for her welfare, suggesting that her resistance to transparency indicated she was hiding something or experiencing paranoid thoughts that required professional attention. This technique effectively turned Rachel's legitimate concerns about privacy into evidence supporting Trevor's narrative about her declining mental state. The manipulation reached a critical point when Trevor began altering Rachel's medication regimen without her knowledge. Rachel had been prescribed low-dose anti-anxiety medication by her primary care physician, Dr. Sarah Williams, to help manage stress related to her declining business and increasing marital tensions. Digital forensics later revealed that Trevor had researched drug interactions and withdrawal symptoms extensively, apparently seeking methods to exacerbate Rachel's anxiety and confusion while maintaining plausible deniability about his involvement. He began substituting Rachel's prescribed medication with placebo pills that looked identical, causing her to experience withdrawal symptoms that he then attributed to her worsening mental condition. The medication tampering created a vicious cycle where Rachel experienced genuine psychological distress, which Trevor used as evidence to support his claims about her instability. When Rachel sought help from Dr. Williams, Trevor accompanied her to appointments and provided his own account of Rachel's behavior, describing symptoms and incidents that were either exaggerated or entirely fabricated. Dr. Williams later testified that Trevor's presence during Rachel's medical appointments was unusual and controlling, but that she had not initially recognized the signs of domestic psychological abuse. Trevor's articulate presentation and apparent concern for Rachel's welfare created a credible facade that masked his manipulative intentions. The situation deteriorated further when Trevor convinced Rachel to sign legal documents that transferred greater control over their shared finances to his management. He presented this as a temporary measure to reduce stress on Rachel while she focused on recovering her mental health. But the documents actually gave Trevor comprehensive authority over their bank accounts, investments, and property decisions. Rachel's increasing isolation and psychological distress made her vulnerable to Trevor's manipulation about these financial arrangements. She signed the documents during a period when her medication withdrawal symptoms were particularly severe, and Trevor later claimed that Rachel had insisted on the changes as part of her effort to reduce responsibilities that were overwhelming her. By October 2024, Rachel's psychological state had deteriorated to the point where she was experiencing frequent panic attacks, insomnia, and periods of confusion that made it difficult for her to maintain even basic daily routines. Her remaining clients had largely terminated their relationships with her business due to missed deadlines and inconsistent communications. Rachel's sister Michelle became increasingly concerned when Rachel stopped responding to phone calls and text messages regularly. During their last conversation in mid-October, Rachel had seemed disoriented and mentioned feeling like she was losing her mind, describing incidents where she couldn't remember important events or conversations. Michelle later told investigators that she had suggested Rachel visit a different doctor for a second opinion about her mental health concerns. But Rachel replied that Trevor thought it would be disloyal to question Dr. Williams' treatment approach. This response alarmed Michelle because it demonstrated how thoroughly Trevor had convinced Rachel to defer to his judgment about her own medical care. The final documented contact with Rachel occurred on October 28, 2024, when she placed a brief phone call to her mother, Linda Patterson. During this conversation, Rachel sounded distressed and mentioned feeling like she needed to get away somewhere quiet to think clearly about her situation. Linda later described Rachel's voice as shaky and uncertain, with long pauses as if she was struggling to organize her thoughts. Rachel mentioned feeling like she couldn't trust her own memory anymore and expressed concern that something was seriously wrong with her mental health. However, Linda also noted that Rachel seemed momentarily more lucid during the conversation, asking specific questions about childhood memories, as if trying to verify that her long-term memory was still intact. This behavior suggested that Rachel was beginning to recognize that her memory problems might be externally caused rather than the result of mental illness. The conversation ended abruptly when Rachel said she heard Trevor coming home and needed to hang up quickly. Linda later realized that this hurried conclusion was unusual, as Rachel had never previously seemed concerned about Trevor overhearing normal family conversations. Trevor reported Rachel missing on November 2nd, 2024, claiming that he had returned home from work to find a note indicating that Rachel had decided to leave temporarily to seek treatment for her mental health issues at an undisclosed location. According to Trevor's initial statement, the note expressed Rachel's belief that she needed professional help and time away from familiar surroundings to recover. However, when Riverside County Sheriff's investigators arrived to take the missing person report, several aspects of Trevor's account raised immediate suspicions. The handwritten note was brief and generic, lacking the specific details or personal references that would typically characterize a genuine communication from someone seeking medical treatment. Additionally, Rachel had left behind all personal belongings, including her purse, identification, medication, and cell phone. Trevor explained that Rachel's departure had been impulsive and that she had taken only basic clothing and some cash that she kept in their bedroom. Detective Maria Santos, assigned to investigate Rachel's disappearance, noted that Trevor's emotional responses seemed inappropriate for someone whose spouse had suddenly vanished. He appeared more concerned about potential embarrassment to his professional reputation than about Rachel's safety or whereabouts. The investigation quickly revealed inconsistencies in Trevor's timeline of events. Security cameras at his workplace showed that he had left early on November 2nd, contradicting his claim that he worked a full day before discovering Rachel's absence. Cell phone tower data also indicated that Trevor's phone had been in the vicinity of their home during hours when he claimed to be at work. Detective Santos expanded the investigation to include Rachel's family members, friends, and professional contacts. The interviews revealed a consistent pattern of observations about Rachel's declining mental state and increasing isolation over the previous months, but also raised questions about Trevor's role in her deterioration. Michelle Patterson provided investigators with text messages from Rachel dating back several months that documented her confusion and distress about memory problems and anxiety symptoms. However, the messages also contained references to incidents that family members could verify had never occurred, suggesting that Rachel's perceptions had been systematically distorted. Dr. Williams cooperated with the investigation by providing Rachel's medical records, which revealed a troubling pattern of escalating symptoms that coincided with Trevor's increased involvement in her medical care. The records also showed that Rachel's prescribed medication should have been effectively managing her anxiety, making her reported deterioration medically inconsistent. The breakthrough in the investigation came when forensic specialists analyzed the monitoring software found on the Morgans' home computer. The software had recorded extensive communications between Trevor and various online forums where he had researched psychological manipulation techniques, medication tampering, and methods of creating untraceable disappearances. Digital evidence showed that Trevor had been planning Rachel's elimination for several months, researching locations where bodies could be disposed of without detection, and investigating legal procedures for declaring missing persons deceased. His online searches included queries about inheritance laws, life insurance claims, and timeline requirements for spousal death certificates. The investigation also revealed financial motives for Rachel's disappearance. Trevor had recently increased Rachel's life insurance coverage to $400,000 and had been systematically transferring their shared assets to accounts under his exclusive control. Bank records showed that he had liquidated Rachel's retirement accounts and business assets while she was experiencing her worst psychological symptoms. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible true crime stories. Let us know in the comments what you think was the most chilling evidence of Trevor's systematic psychological abuse. Search warrants for the Morgan residence and Trevor's vehicle revealed physical evidence that contradicted his claim about Rachel's voluntary departure. Luminol testing detected blood traces in their garage and on cleaning supplies, suggesting that violence had occurred in the home despite Trevor's denials. Forensic analysis of Trevor's vehicle found carpet fibers and soil samples that matched materials from several remote locations in Riverside County, where investigators suspected Rachel's body might have been disposed of. However, extensive searches of these areas failed to locate Rachel's remains, leaving investigators without the crucial evidence needed to prove murder. Trevor was arrested on December 15, 2024, and charged with domestic violence, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy related to Rachel's disappearance. However, without recovering Rachel's body or obtaining direct evidence of her death, prosecutors faced significant challenges in pursuing murder charges. The case attracted national media attention as an example of sophisticated psychological abuse that escalated to suspected murder. Mental health advocates used Trevor's manipulations tactics to educate the public about recognizing signs of gaslighting and emotional abuse in relationships. Rachel's family established a foundation to support victims of psychological domestic abuse, focusing on providing resources for people whose abusers had convinced them to doubt their own perceptions and judgment. The foundation emphasized that gaslighting often precedes more serious forms of violence. Trevor's trial for the charges related to Rachel's disappearance began in March 2025. Prosecutors presented evidence of systematic psychological abuse, financial manipulation, and premeditated planning for Rachel's elimination, arguing that Trevor had essentially tortured his wife psychologically before killing her. The defense strategy focused on arguing that Rachel had indeed left voluntarily due to genuine mental health issues that had not been caused by Trevor's behavior. Defense attorneys attempted to portray Trevor as a concerned husband who had been trying to help his wife cope with severe psychological problems. However, the overwhelming digital evidence of Trevor's research into manipulation, techniques, and disposal methods, combined with testimony from mental health experts about the effects of gaslighting, convinced the jury that Rachel had been the victim of systematic abuse that led to her death. Trevor was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The judge emphasized that psychological abuse could be just as devastating as physical violence, and that Trevor's systematic destruction of Rachel's mental health represented one of the most callous forms of domestic violence. Rachel's body was never recovered despite extensive searches throughout Southern California. Her family continues to hope that her remains will eventually be found, allowing them to provide proper closure and burial. The case prompted changes in how law enforcement agencies investigate domestic violence cases involving psychological manipulation. Training programs were developed to help officers recognize signs of gaslighting and other forms of emotional abuse that might escalate to physical violence. Mental health professionals also used the Morgan case to develop improved screening tools for identifying victims of psychological abuse who might not recognize the manipulation they were experiencing. The case demonstrated how abusers could use medical and legal systems to further their control over victims. Trevor Morgan is currently serving his sentence at California State Prison in Corcoran. He has maintained his innocence and continues to claim that Rachel left voluntarily, though he has never provided credible information about her possible whereabouts. The investigation into Rachel's disappearance remains technically open, with investigators continuing to follow up on potential leads about her location. However, law enforcement officials believe that Trevor successfully disposed of Rachel's remains in a way that may prevent their discovery. Rachel's story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of psychological domestic abuse and the importance of recognizing manipulation tactics before they escalate to physical violence. Her family continues to advocate for improved legal protections for victims of emotional abuse and better training for professionals who work with domestic violence survivors. The case also highlighted gaps in the mental health system's ability to recognize when patients' symptoms might be caused by deliberate manipulation rather than genuine mental illness. Medical professionals have since developed protocols for identifying potential abuse when treating patients for anxiety and memory problems. Michelle Patterson continues to search for answers about her sister's fate and maintains hope that Trevor will eventually reveal information about Rachel's location. The family's dedication to finding Rachel has inspired other families dealing with missing loved ones and suspicious circumstances involving domestic abuse.